and I have, a couple of people in my inner circle who are really battling some difficult stuff. So I have a lot of things that are taking my attention, and have beginning in really January, away from football, and that's been where I've been focusing most of my attention on. To make a commitment to a team is a big thing, whether you're a first-year player or a 20-year vet.
Listen, Aaron Rodgers is talking about real life stuff, and one of the truisms that I've found in life is that as you get older, things get more complex.
Sure.
So when you're in your 20s, you're carefree. When you're in your 30s, you're just starting out your career, most folks. And so there isn't a lot of complexity to what you have going on in your life. But when you get into your 40s, when you're in the prime of life, there are a lot of things that you have to contend with. And so I understand all of what Aaron Rodgers is saying. My life is not as simple as do or don't I want to play football. There are a lot of other responsibilities, a lot of other obligations. That being said, NFL teams are about the business of putting together their team and knowing who their quarterback is going into the NFL draft. And there are a lot of teams that are in holding patterns waiting on this Aaron Rodgers domino to fall. Mm-hmm. And chiefly among them is the Pittsburgh Steelers. So if you're hearing that, if you're Art Rooney II or Mike Tomlin, you got to have a little bit of angst now as we're days away from the NFL draft kicking off.
They should have had angst the minute that they wanted to be involved, CC, in the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes. And that's not to say that they shouldn't wait for him. I thought they should have put a deadline on this whole thing. I say, hey, Aaron Rodgers, we definitely want you here. Remember the movie, Remember the Titans? I want you here. But, you got to do what you got to do. You can't allow that to happen if you're the Steelers, CC, to your point. Because right now your quarterback room has Mason Rudolph at the top of that quarterback stack.
Not great.
Not great. Mason Rudolph, nice enough guy, nice enough quarterback. But if you believe you can contend in a division where you got to play Joe Burrow twice a year and Lamar Jackson twice a year from the Bengals and the Ravens respectively, then Mason Rudolph should not be at the top of your stack.
You don't feel great about Skylar Thompson?
Does Skylar Thompson feel great about Skylar Thompson? Maybe that's the question.
I'm sorry.
I'm not trying to ditch on Skylar
Thompson to catch no strays on our show.
Skylar, I'm going to apologize for that. I should not be doing that to you because, hey, you had a chance to play quarterback in the National Football League. I don't care if you're a first stringer, the second stringer,
started
third stringer.
Started a playoff game.
Thank you very much.
Time.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, you've done more than 99.999% of the world involving playing at the highest level in the National Football League. But if I'm the Steelers, I'd have placed a deadline and say, Aaron, I know you got things going on in your life. I know you got to handle a couple of those things, but we got to think about the organization first. We can't be thinking about you first. And I would have put a deadline saying, when are you going to make a decision? If you don't make a decision by X number, X day on the calendar, then we got to go on with our lives. And I guarantee you that would have pushed up the timeline, in my opinion, about Aaron Rodgers making a decision.
But here's the thing, Freddie. See, even if they give him a deadline, doesn't mean that Aaron Rodgers has to respect it. Because regardless of what the Pittsburgh Steelers do from this point on, Aaron Rodgers is likely going to be the most talented quarterback that they have an opportunity to sign.
There's no doubt.
Even if they draft a guy with the 21st overall pick, even if they move up in the draft to take a quarterback, if they decide they want to try to swing a trade for Kirk Cousins, doesn't matter what alternatives they have to Rodgers. If they put a deadline on him, if they say we got to know by X date whether or not you're going to sign with us, why does Aaron Rodgers have to respect that?
Well, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, then you shouldn't have to respect him making you wait. If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, when you involve yourself with a quarterback that you know is going to be better than anybody having your quarterback room, you went out and got a DK Metcalf to make sure that it wasn't just going to be George Pickens and him and Pat Frymouth. You needed that thumper on the outside.
No doubt.
It doesn't help the Pittsburgh Steelers that there's video of Aaron Rodgers throwing with DK Metcalf, and I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, we know you want to be here. Why are we waiting? Why are you making us wait? Because we know how important you are. We know how important you are to our franchise in terms of us being better when we get to the playoffs, that we have not been at the quarterback position. But at a certain point, if you're Aaron Rodgers, you got to read the room. The room is just not about you, even though it has been about him in his whole NFL Hall of Fame career.
I don't understand why the Pittsburgh Steelers voluntarily backed themselves into this corner.
Now, that's a better answer.
I don't understand it. I don't understand how we've gotten to the place where there's so much uncertainty, so much ambiguity around what they're doing at the quarterback position, and we're on the eve of the NFL draft. I mean, you would like to know whether or not you've got your quarterback so you can set your draft board and you can know the other positions of need that your team probably has to address, especially early on when you're looking at those prospective premium draft picks as day one starters. I don't understand why Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan, their general manager, would let it get to this point.
You know why? Because he is still seductive enough as a quarterback where you say to yourself, man, whatever happened with the Jets, but we know we're a better organization. We got better personnel. We got a better infrastructure.
Do you have better personnel than the New York Jets in terms of the overall roster?
Offensively, I think you believe that. I'm talking about from the Steelers' perspective, not from my perspective.
You think that George Pickens and DK Metcalf are head and shoulders above Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson?
Well, Devontae Adams will be playing with the Jets this year.
No, I know he won't be, and that's presumably because there's no Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
He came to New York because he wanted to play with his good buddy. But I guess my whole question is, when you looked at that Jets roster in comparison to what the Pittsburgh Steelers are rolling out there with, I don't know that the Steelers, from a talent standpoint, are head and shoulders above where the New York Jets were. Now, if you want to make the argument about the competency of the franchise, the stability with the coaching staff, so on and so forth, I'm with you there.
Okay.
But if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, Aaron Rodgers going into his age 42 season, I don't know why you suspect that things would go markedly better with you as opposed to what we saw at the end in Green Bay and what we saw him on the field with the New York Jets this past year. I don't know why you would think it would get better.
Because desperate teams and desperate situations make desperate decisions.
But you're desperate because you put yourself in this spot.
Exactly.
You're desperate because you didn't re-sign Russell Wilson.
Yep.
You're desperate because you didn't re-sign Justin Fields. That's the part that I don't get. And I'm not trying to play Monday morning quarterback here, but why did you decide that you were out on those guys and that you were willing to wait around and be left in a holding pattern for Aaron Rodgers, one of the most mercurial players that we've had in our league? As Michelle Smallman says, the self-proclaimed enigma. Why would you want to stake your team's football future on a quarterback that at this stage of the game, April 18th, hasn't decided whether or not he wants to play football in 2025.
Right.
As my former head coach, Bill Parcells, used to say, if you're thinking about retirement, you are retired. So I don't think the Pittsburgh Steelers are giving themselves the best chance to field the most competitive team this upcoming season by waiting on Aaron Rodgers.
I'm not going to say that you're wrong. By the Chris Canty, Freddie Coleman together on a Sportsman presented by Progressive Insurance and ESPN Radio and ESPN2. I'm not going to say that you're wrong. What you had to say about waiting for a guy like this, as Michelle Smallman called him, the self-proclaimed enigma when it comes to Aaron Rodgers. But if you believe that you're a quarterback away and he's the best quarterback available, that's why the Pittsburgh Steelers have placed themselves in this corner. That's why they have put themselves in this box.
You may be a quarterback away, but as we saw with the New York Jets, you're not an Aaron Rodgers away. Well, as we saw with the Green Bay Packers, you're not an Aaron Rodgers away. Yeah. The Green Bay Packers in 2022 were 8-9 with Aaron Rodgers. They had a win-and-in situation, Lambeau Field against the Detroit Lions, division rival, that had nothing to play for. And they lost that game, and the team scored a grand total of 16 points. And Aaron Rodgers turned the football over. Like that was him. He did that. So why would you think that you're an Aaron Rodgers away? It doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
And for the Pittsburgh Steelers, you've got to stop the revolving door at quarterback. If 2025 is about nothing else, it's about figuring out what our long-term solution at quarterback is, because it doesn't feel like we're poised to win a championship. You're not winning a championship with Aaron Rodgers. I'm not sure if the Steelers know this. Dude been in the league 20 years, only went to one Super Bowl. He won it, but he only went to one Super Bowl.
Right.
So why would you think the second time that's going to happen would be in his age 42 season? It's absolutely ridiculous. But I'm going to tell you something else.
Okay.
You know what else is ridiculous?
What's that?
What the Pittsburgh Steelers offense has been the last 5 years.
Okay.
So across several different starting quarterbacks, of course, you had Russell Wilson / Justin Fields. You had the Kenny Pickett / Mason Rudolph era. And you had a washed-up Ben Roethlisberger. Over the last 5 seasons, the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, 24th in points per game, 27th in total offense, 29th in touchdowns scored, and 22nd in QBR. That's urgent as hell. In terms of finding a quarterback. You can't win like that. And yet Mike Tomlin hasn't had a losing season, and that's been his offense over the last 5 years. One of the worst in the National Football League. And it's the worst because you haven't stabilized the most important position in all of team sports, which is quarterback. Why are we rolling with the retread of Aaron Rodgers? Rip the Band-Aid off. Go for a long-term solution. Draft a quarterback. And guess what? Even if you don't hit on this quarterback, you keep drafting them until you find a guy. That's what you do. And you lean on the luxury of having a head coach that'll allow you to play competitive football in the interim. But this business of going with half measures because Aaron Rodgers is experienced, and once upon a time, 15 years ago, he won a Super Bowl, is just ridiculous.
I got a great counter to that I know Chris Canty is not going to like. I can promise you that on the other side. And the Jets decided that, hey, Chris Canty's right. We're not rolling with Aaron Rodgers with Aaron Glenn as our new head coach. Waiting to hear Chris Canty say about why Aaron Rodgers felt so hurt about that. We'll do that here on Sportsman, presented by Progressive Insurance and ESPN Radio and the ESPN app and ESPN.
Chào cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Ngày hôm nay mình sẽ tiếp tục hướng dẫn các bạn